Welcome to the Grassroots To Greatness podcast. This week we have a guest in Craig Coles, who is a coach that I've worked with for many years, has extensive experience working in the grassroots game as well as in academy football, and has a big background in multi-sports as well. So we should learn a lot today from Craig. Enjoy the listen, and hopefully there's going to be lots of tips in this podcast for you. Right, Craig, how are you?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Right, what we'll do is we always kind of start with, if you can just talk us kind of through your coaching journey so far. So where you started up to basically where you are now.
Yeah, started it when I was 16 or 15, 16, just going back to my local primary school, just helping out with the after-school football club that they had there. And then from there, just went into, got to know a few people with regards to like small sports coaching companies and people that were within that business, I suppose, and then just went from there. Really ended up helping out with the community trust that was at Gillingham, and then sort of snowballed from that and ended up meeting Alex from here, and then obviously came on board from that. Then went and joined the Gills Development Centres, Advanced Centres, and an academy. Was there for 7 years before I had a bit of a break. Obviously, with regards to school stuff, ever since, like I said before, since I was sort of 15, 16, so I was involved in it, and then have been ever since up until now, again with various companies, and then with TSC for the last 8 years, I think it is now.
Does that show how old you are?
It does show how old I am, yeah. And then, more recently gone into men's football, started at Canterbury City, went to Sheppey United, went to Whitstable, and then just helping out with Faversham Strike Force, which is a local club to me now. So, a broad background, shall we say.
So with just more specifically in the grassroots stuff, what was when you started off coaching, what grassroots teams were you helping coach at? So
the first team I ever did was a club called Canterbury Youth. So they had an under-7s team that one of the mums who was at the school that I worked at, again when I was only 15, 16, said that they didn't have a coach for their team. And I just basically said, yeah, I'll give it a go. And then, that was really the only team that I stayed with, to be honest, until I went to Gills. So I was probably with them for about 3 years, I think, until I was with them until they moved to 9v9, so 7s, 8s, 9s and 10s I was probably with them for. And then, when I then went into the actual academy stuff at Gills, that's when I then stopped doing the grassroots stuff and then went into that. So
you had quite probably a quick journey from grassroots to academy in terms of how many years in total?
So in terms of like assisting, it was probably only 2 years. So I started at Gills when I was 18.
Yeah.
Assisting there. And I started my grassroots journey with Canterbury Youth at 16. So, I probably only had about 2 years, really.
So from that, obviously you was doing a lot of stuff with other companies, et cetera, with a multi-sports background, before you focused on that. Now, obviously I started multi-sports background in schools as well. When I worked for Charlton, it was... working for a football club, but most of the stuff was multi-sports, dealing with loads of different kids, different backgrounds, different ability levels, from different areas, definitely as well. How do you feel that working in a multi-sports environment helped make you a better football coach?
I think understanding people, and as I say people, but it's probably more children, like understanding how to deal with different behaviours, understanding how to deal with different learning abilities. Like some children will learn through you telling and explaining them. Some children will learn from you showing them. One thing that I always say to coaches now when I do my coach mentoring is like you always need to show and tell people something. It can't just be one or the other. You have to do both. And I think that sort of came to fruition quite quickly when I was doing multi-sport stuff within schools, because ultimately football, it's not easy to coach, but it's one of the easier sports to be able to coach. And I think especially when you're doing things like tennis, hockey, cricket, when it's more complex skills and more complex coordination skills, I think that ultimately you do need to have a bit more of a you need to be more, I can't think what the word is now, need to be more, not understanding, more, can't think of the word now.
This is why you're a sports coach, not an English teacher.
Yeah, definitely. I can't think of it.
I think like for me, there was, when we first worked together, I remember you coming to help me with a lesson, which basically meant you taking the lesson and me standing back. But it was a group of children that were quite difficult to coach in terms of keeping them engaged and behaviour levels, etc. But you done a session with a bucket of tennis balls, and they had one tennis ball per person, and you done an hour session, and the kids were so engaged. And it was even just like different ways of moving the ball in your hands, around your bodies, etc., etc. It's probably one of the best lessons I'd ever seen of keeping kids engaged, because I struggled with that group. Why do you think that, or what do you think were the best ways that you used to, or techniques you used to use to keep children engaged when you coach them?
I think the biggest thing is always giving them something to do or a piece of equipment to use, because you look at it nowadays, like, and again, I know it's difficult because a lot of grassroots coaches and even schools don't have the amount of equipment that sometimes we have had. But the more that you can give them, the more they're going to be engaged in it, and ultimately the lessons can then cater around that equipment that you're using. So it's, rather than doing it something in pairs, in threes, can they do it on their own? And the more opportunity that they have and the more repetition that they have doing something on their own, more often than not, is going to make them a little bit better and get them to develop quicker.
And I think if I relate that to football, we're massive on ball each.
Yeah,
especially foundation phase, younger players, ball each, as much time as they can get manipulating the ball.
Yep.
But there's this danger of, you get a ball, you dribble around an area, you're doing step overs and turns, etc. But there's no kind of stimulant to why you're doing it. So we'll always look at
challenges. Yeah, it's just challenges. It's just like even if you've got like a tennis ball in your hands, like how many times can you throw it and catch it? Like how many times can you throw, clap, and then catch it? Like it's just like adding in little things like that is, I suppose, a little bit like a carrot on the end of a stick, especially for kids. Like because we're talking about kids that are anything from 5 up to 10, 11. Like when you give them a little carrot or a little bit of something, and they're like, actually, yeah, I'll try that. I think all of a sudden they then want to do it more. But it's not necessarily you saying to them, we are going to work on doing X, Y, Z, but giving them the challenge just automatically makes them work on that specific skill. So yeah,
and then we want to obviously link that to the intrinsic motivation. So with those kids, it's trying to beat your score.
Yes.
Like, don't worry about what anyone else's scores are. If you can get 2, can you get to 3?
Yeah.
If you can get 3, can you get to 4? It doesn't matter if someone else can do 100. And we've always pushed that way with kids in terms of like dribbling, keepy ups. Keepy ups is always a big one. How many can you do?
Yeah.
Starting off with drop, let it bounce, do kicks with a bounce in between, etc., etc. What about the kind of behavioural side then for your multi-sports career? Because that can be, if we're relating now to grassroots coaches, you've probably got those kids in there that you think misbehave a lot, or you think don't listen or are disengaged. But what tips have you got for trying to get everyone engaged in your session?
I think behaviour is a big thing for me, in terms of you have to look at yourself and what are you doing first, because ultimately I've seen, and I've done it when I've gone and done mentoring as well, where people go, I really struggle with this group because like they don't listen. And I then stand back and look at the session and I go, okay, well, I can understand why they don't listen, because they're not engaged. They're in a line of 7, 8 children waiting to have a turn, or you're playing a game, but you've got all the best players on one team, and all the other team have then got weaker players. But again, first thing for me is always like look at yourself first, and it's something that as I've got older, I've started to do a lot quicker in terms of looking at the session I'm doing, and actually if they're not engaged, it's what am I doing? Not what are they doing, it's what am I doing to help them to engage more, so that there is then less poor behaviour. But in terms of behaviour, I think the one thing for me that I've always had, and I don't know why, but I've always had a sort of a soft touch for children that have maybe got learning difficulties, and having that patience and having the right attitude in terms of having little steps for them. So actually, if they join in for 5 minutes out of a 15-minute part of a session, that's fine, that's okay. And I think some people see the learning difficulties and go, oh no, they're just really hard to handle. But actually, if you get onto their level, if you plan a session around things that they enjoy, the things that they like. So like some children might be really good with maths, then okay, well, can I maybe do a session that includes stuff to do with numbers? So that again, you can then engage those children that maybe behaviourally are more difficult per se. But actually, if you can get onto their level in terms of what they enjoy doing and what they're actually good at doing, then all of a sudden it then makes it a little bit easier for you as a coach as well.
Yeah, brilliant. No, that's really good. There's some really good things in there, and starting with ourselves is always a big thing, and it's quite hard because it's easier to kind of blame others. Yeah. But also, I suppose a lot of coaches won't have those reflective skills yet. No. So it's always it
comes with time and experience.
Yeah, and if you've got an assistant coach, always get them to kind of step back and watch you as well and give you feedback, etc. Okay, so here's a challenging one for you then. You're starting with a new under-9s team. They're a kind of average standard team, so they've always been playing. They win some, they lose some, they draw some, etc. You're going in to coach this team for the season. What does your first 6 weeks look like? What would you work with them on in the first 6 weeks?
I think we've already spoken about it, but like lots of ball each at the start of sessions, like ball each every single time. Try and make the first part of the session as engaging as possible, so that they, again, talk about dangling the carrot on the end of a stick, like try and lure them into wanting to do more of the session. I think sometimes if you go into an arrival activity and it's quite boring, sometimes you then lose them a little bit when you then want to try and get into like the main part of the session. So I think as much as you can, it's ball each, but make the start of the session like fun and exciting, so that they then want to do more. After that, I think a lot of it is probably on receiving, passing, 1v1s, 2v1s, 2v2s, 3v3s, 3v2s, things like that, just to try and get the repetition of it, because ultimately for kids that are under 9s, that's either 5v5 or 7v7. So again, trying to make things small, trying to double up on things. So if you're doing, I don't know, if you want to do a keep ball rather than doing an 8v5, can you do a 4v2 or 2 lots of 4v2? So try and make it smaller to start off with. You can always progress to making it bigger, but I think the big thing for me with especially younger players is if you can make it small so they get more repetition, but they also get more success at that repetition, I think they then end up learning more.
So actually, just following on that, obviously you worked grassroots and academy, and they're different. So in academy, especially where the under 9s is normally 5v5, isn't it? If you've got enough players to have a couple of 5v5s, sometimes 7v7, whereas grassroots at 9s is normally 7s. What do you prefer out of 5-a-side or 7-a-side for that age group?
5v5 all day. For under 9s, for me, it's always 5v5. Like you've got smaller numbers. Like I say, they get more success. They've got more time. They've got more space on the ball. They've got more opportunity to do things. They've got more touches on the ball. Don't get me wrong. Yes, I understand it's nice for players to get into playing on bigger pitches with more players earlier. I get the people that want to do that, but for me, it's not a want for the players. It's a want for the coach. And I think the difficulty is that you then go high too quickly. And when I say high, I mean high numbers on the pitch. I think when you go too high too quickly, a lot of the technical aspects and tactical aspects end up getting lost. And I think that's when you end up then looking at teams that when they get to sort of under 15, 16s and then 18s, actually they're just average. They're okay players. Whereas I think the players that end up kicking on at grassroots to potentially academy standard, for me, those players are players that have had the opportunity at their grassroots clubs or at private academies where they've done lots of small-sided games or technical sessions.
Yeah, that's interesting. I agree. I think some of it is there's a race to, we want to get to 11-a-side quickly. Yeah. But I think I have sympathy for that, because for a lot of people it's understanding. They've always watched 11-a-side, so it's easier to relate to. Yeah. Whereas all 5, 7, 9-a-side is a smaller version of that. It's the same principles. The principles don't change, but the younger players they need more repetition, more decisions, more touches. Yeah. They get that in the smaller game. Yeah. And that will help them become better players in the 11-a-side game.
It's working in units as well still, isn't it? Like at 5v5, like you're still working in pairs. You're still potentially working as a free. Like when you go to 7v7, you're still working in pairs and threes. Even when you go all the way out to 11v11, you're still working in pairs. You're still working as 2 centre halves. You're still working as 2 centre midfielders. You're still working as a left back and a left midfielder. Like you're still getting that at under 9s. It just doesn't look like it because it's on a small pitch.
Is it? And that's really interesting now, because obviously they're looking at. Well, I think it's been brought in now over the next couple of years. The youngest age groups will change to 3v3. 5v5, 7, 9s and 11s will start later, which I'm excited about. I think it's a really good thing for players' development. Yep. The other thing they've brought in, I wanted to get your opinion on, is for under 7s to 9s, obviously heading is banned. Yep. And now they're not doing throw-ins. They're either going to pass or dribble in. What's your thoughts on that change?
More repetition at technique. So for me, it's only a positive for players, because you'd like to then think that actually they're passing, their decision-making ability to try and find different types of passes. All of a sudden, it's a dead ball situation, but actually, I think it's only positive. It's only going to help players to develop more. Like if they decide to dribble in from the side of the pitch and they've got space in front of them, they're then working on driving with the ball. If they're going to try and pass the ball in from the side of the pitch, actually, rather than just trying to just pass the ball to someone who's in front of them, actually, can you try and find a pass that goes in between someone? And I think all of a sudden, where players are doing that unopposed, especially the passing part, actually, when they then get on the pitch, they might then start seeing some of those pictures. So actually, all of a sudden, they then start trying to make some of those passes on the pitch that they do on the side of the pitch.
Yeah, so I think it's a brilliant thing. I've just done a video on it on our Coaches Club, which talks about why I think it's such a good thing. But I always kind of look at the other side of it as well, thinking, what could go wrong with it? And I think it will be a really positive thing if the coaches embrace it, because
in the right way.
Yeah, because
I know what you're going to say.
Well, in my team, I'm coaching under 7s from September. What they'll be doing is whoever's closest goes and gets the ball and takes either the pass or dribbling. Yeah. You will get probably some teams that go,
who can kick it the furthest?
Who can kick it the furthest, or who's my best dribbler? You go and take it every single time. Yeah. Because it will help them win games. Yeah. So I look at that. I also look at the other rules that have been brought in over the years, like the retreat rule, for example. Under 7's great. I'm not a fan of it in the older age groups. So it's 8s, 9s, 10s.
For me, I think at 7s and 8s, I agree with it. At 9s and 10s, I don't.
No, and that's where I think it should be a transitional phase. So at 9s, let one person start in the other half. At 10s, then let 2 start in. So you're still encouraging playing out from the back.
And I think the issue that you get is you go from retreat rule to nothing. Yeah. And all of a sudden, players are like, well, hang on a minute. Like, I've not learnt how to deal with playing under pressure. Yeah. So all of a sudden you've gone from 7s to 10s is retreat rule, play out, if you want to play out, that is. But if they do want to play out, it's play out without any pressure. All of a sudden you go to 11v11 and all of a sudden you've got a player standing next to you and you're trying to play out, and it's like, well, how do I do it?
And that's why where we coach, obviously we don't use a retreat rule because we want them to deal with it under pressure. And it also,
and at academy football you don't either.
And there's that controversial, one saying I hate is when someone passes to someone who's marked, and they'll say, "Don't pass that player, they're marked." And I'm like, no. Pass to the player who's marked, but coach the player to get better at dealing with receiving the ball when they're under pressure.
Shielding.
Shielding. my favourite subject. But that's the solution. The solution's not don't play that pass. It's like when people say don't play across your box. All the top teams do, but do play across your box. Just learn to do it well.
Yeah, time and a place. Yeah.
Right. So kind of going back to you as a person with your coaching, what would you say your core values are as a coach?
Respect, definitely. I think mainly because when I was younger and like having the opportunity to see the coaches that I have and to coach alongside them, like I always had respect for them and like wanting to learn off them. And I think like I'm the same now. Like if I'm coaching players, like you want that respect. That's whether they're 7, 8 years old or whether they're 28 years old. Like for me personally, I feel that I've always had the same level of respect no matter who I've coached. Again, whether that's children or whether that's adults. So yeah, for me as a person, I think that's one of my big values. Other one's just attitude. It's just, and again, it's okay to get frustrated. It's okay to be annoyed at things. From a player's point of view, I completely get it. But I think having the right attitude and application, for me as a coach, but also from players as well. I think if you apply yourself in the right ways and you try to do the right things at the right times, again, players and coaches, I think you end up getting success. So yeah, probably those.
Yeah, and I think for yourself, you're a coach that I know always works really hard at what you do with your coaching, but you are always trying to learn, you're always trying to improve. And where I come back to, that was quite a short journey from where you went in terms of started coaching to getting into an academy within a few years and starting as an assistant, then progressing up to leading your age group. Yeah, come down to work ethic and willingness to learn. Like that's the big thing. Is going when you do most of your work when you're not coaching. Yeah. That's when you do most of your development. Is what you're doing when you're not coaching. What are you learning? What are you trying to improve? What do you do? Going back to that period of time, what did you do away from the pitch that helped you develop?
I think like little things for me. Like I used to on match days when I first joined Gills. Obviously, again, it was a new environment for me. I'd never really done it before. And I used to go on stand. It sounds a little bit sad, but I used to go and stand on the side of the pitch next to the coaches, and I had a notebook, and I used to write down challenges and like expressions that coaches would use on the sideline, and I've still got it now. But just little things like that like for me now, like I look back at it and like it was invaluable. Like if I still use a lot of those like trigger words or those expressions now, even when I'm coaching older players. Like, don't get me wrong, a lot of the stuff that I got from them is for younger players, and I use them for younger players. But it's just little things like that, or just voice recording, like people on the sideline, or even yourself on the sideline, just listening back to it. Obviously, I was in a lucky position where like some of my sessions would get like filmed and like watching them back and thinking actually I could have done that differently this time, and so on and so forth. One thing I will always say is that working with someone else is massive. I think a lot of people don't utilise assistant coaches or maybe other people that are within their teams as much as they could do. It's definitely something I've seen when I've done my mentoring, but I think utilising those people that are working alongside you away from the pitch, that you do a session and you finish it and you're like, what did you think? And they're like, well, could have maybe changed that, and I mean, like, you even look at it now, like when I worked with Marcel at Sheppey and Whitstable, like we never went into the change room straight away, like pre-match, during the match, after the match. We would always have that time away that we would have a discussion, because I think if you take yourself away from it, you end up thinking about it and analysing it and getting more out of it than just going straight away, oh no, that wasn't very good, or oh no, that was amazing today. So yeah, I think just sometimes having that ability to step back away from things.
I think now what you said there about filming yourself or listening to yourself, Obviously you're in a lucky position, you said there, but everyone can do that.
They can nowadays, yeah.
Yeah,
it's a lot easier.
So I'm a big fan of it, especially if you've got an assistant. Even if you haven't got an assistant, get a parent to do it. Every time you're going to put a coaching point in or say something, just get someone to film you.
Yeah.
Just get someone standing there with your phone and film you, and then you can listen back to the message you're saying, what you said. The thing about voice recording yourself during training and match day is massive. I got huge lessons when this first happened to me and the way I done it was just left my phone in my pocket on voice record, and then all I'd done was the task that a lot of people should do is put down a little tally mark of who I spoke to during the game, and then progress that to do it to go when I spoke to them, was it a question? Did I tell them what to do?
Was it a command? Was it a trial and error? Was it a guidance discovery?
Negative? And then what you'll find is, when you actually do this as an exercise, and any grassroots coach can do this, is just do that, plot it on a map. You'll notice the winger that is stood next to you gets hammered hammered with information for the whole game, whether it's positive, negative questions.
Yeah.
The one on the far side won't get much, and then after half time that swaps over. But you also then start to notice that even if you just measure, if I said something positive, negative, or asked a question, even if you just do that to each player, you start to go, well, do you know what? I've been really negative towards that player. And then you can start to make correlations going, well, do you know what? That player wasn't happy at half time when I didn't see himself. But you don't realise that you've said 5 things to him and they've all been negative.
Yeah.
Whereas someone else you've said loads of positives to, or someone you've asked loads of questions to. But it's an easy thing to do of just... And it's probably, like, for some people, it's quite horrifying listening to themselves back.
The first couple of times I had it, I hated it. Absolutely hated it. I'm a little bit better with it now, but first couple of times I watched me back on video, so I was just I couldn't listen to it. Couldn't listen to it.
But just for coaches, film your sessions with a phone. Get someone to film your interventions, or put it on voice record during your pocket, especially on match day, and then you can see what you're saying and how it comes across.
It's easy now. Like I've got a tripod for my iPad. Just literally, take, if you've got an iPad or a tablet, just like take your tablet to training, just stick it on the side of the pitch and just record. Like, again, you haven't got to record the whole thing, but sometimes it is good to just watch back something that you've done before and go, actually, like, that did work, I'll do that again next time, or that didn't work, I'll do this differently next time. And
it's kind of holding up a mirror as well, because what we tend to do is we'll have a VO or we'll do recordings, and what we're always recording is the players.
Yeah.
Whereas actually we need to turn it around and record ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's how coaches will get better at looking at themselves. Okay, so a question that I ask pretty much everyone that comes on the podcast. The reason I ask this is because it's a question we probably get asked most on courses, online, by coaches, is what we call differentiation. About most teams have got players, well, every team has got players of different ability levels, but in some teams that gap is wider than in others. How do you coach players of different ability levels within the same group?
I think obviously something easy that I'd imagine most people would say is like overloads and underloads. So like those that are maybe stronger players can play in an underload against an overloaded team. Sometimes it's putting a couple of stronger players with maybe some of the players that are struggling a little bit more, maybe to support those players, depending on what age group they are, what type of player they are. Sometimes you might get a player that is actually one of your best players, but is also like really supportive and encouraging. So actually putting them on a team with people that maybe struggle a little bit more helps them to develop and become maybe a little bit better. A lot of small group work, stuff that I've always done ever since ever since I did my Youth Mod 2 course back in the day, is just like loads of small group work. So like putting players in groups of 3, in groups of 4, and doing a technical or an opposed session based on their ability. So putting players that are as good as each other against each other. If you're doing 1v1s and 2v2s, 3v3s, again, trying to match people up so that they get success. I think that's a big thing for me, especially in grassroots football, is that word success, in that a lot of people will go, oh, you didn't do it right, you didn't shoot properly, you didn't receive properly, etc., etc. But actually you have to look at it and go, well, did they get the opportunity to have success? at that session or at that specific technique that you wanted them to work on. And I think the more opportunities you can give players as a coach to get success, the more opportunity they will then have to develop and to get better. Again, that can work in different ways. It might be that something that you do with players that are struggling starts off as unopposed and moves to opposed practice. Something that something that the players that are better within the group, you might chuck them straight into an opposed practice. But again, for me personally, I would always try and not match them up, but I'd always try and put them in groups in terms of they're a stronger group and they're a group that maybe struggle with this specific thing. And then you maybe try and lean a little bit more towards those that are struggling and give a little bit more time to them, and maybe just chuck challenges towards those that are maybe some of your stronger players.
I think the key thing you said there for me was they struggle at certain things.
Yeah.
Because
it won't be everything.
Yeah, and because you'll always find you've got the player that dominates stuff and is classed as the best player, but they're not the best at everything.
No.
So actually, because you don't want to fall into that trap of, right, you four are always together and then you four are always together, because you get that separation of we're the good players, they're the weaker players. But actually, if you have it one week where
you're working on defending.
Yeah.
Or actually, you might be our best player, but you're not very good at defending. So actually, you're defending. You need to go with those players that are maybe struggling. Actually, someone else who's in that group of better players, actually, you need to go in there as well.
Yeah. And I think that mixing it up so your group doesn't become kind of split is really important.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. Okay, couple more questions. What would you say the best things are about grassroots football? And then if you was in charge of all of grassroots football, what would you change?
That would be dangerous. Best things about grassroots football now?
Yeah.
I think accessibility nowadays, I think, is 10 times better than when I did it. I say when I did it, I'm not that old, but it's still a lot better. A lot better. Like the facilities, the number of coaches, the quality of coaches compared to what it was when I did it, compared to now, like it's chalk and cheese. And I mean, we're probably talking 20 years ago. But yeah, to think what it was like 20 years ago and to see what it's like now, it's come a big way. So yeah, I think accessibility is a big thing. And I think opportunity is probably the other, in terms of like the opportunity to play with your friends, the opportunity to go and play with your peers, the opportunity to go and play for like not necessarily grassroots, but like other like sort of like private academies as well, like things like that, and whenever around when I grew up. But to have the opportunity to go and do that now, I think is really, really positive. And also for grassroots coaches, like there weren't many opportunities for grassroots coaches previously to sort of go and develop and get into potentially the pro or the semi-pro game. Whereas I think now for grassroots coaches, I think there's so many more opportunities now. Whether that's through a pro club and going into the community, then development centres, advanced centres like I did, or whether that's going into, like I said before, like a private football academy and getting into there. Because ultimately the majority of us that I can think of that sort of like work within the football academy at TSC, like probably say at least 50% of us all started off as grassroots coaches and have eventually then progressed into becoming a B licence or an A licence or a academy coach. So yeah,
it's an interesting one, because we get obviously we run a private academy. We're not a professional academy or a private academy, but loads of people hate us, like in terms of not us specifically, but the setups and stuff like that. I think there are probably some rogue ones about that just promise the world, say we're going to make everyone professional footballer, blah blah blah, we'll take your money, etc. Our perspective is we'll help people reach their potential, and that's kids that come to us, but also coaches. And I think that's a really good point. Like, we look at all the coaches that have worked for us over the years, loads have gone on and progressed into full-time jobs, into working abroad, etc. But there wasn't those opportunities 20 years ago. And coaching, I still up until a few years ago, I still have my dad asking me when I'm going to get a proper job. But it is now a viable career and a proper job, and it's not just reserved for some ex-pros that go into academy football. No. The opportunities are there, and we said that most of our coaches came from Grassroots. We've now got our own development system where they play for us to a certain age, and then we take them on as coaching apprentices, do their apprenticeship, level 1, level 2, etc. So the opportunities are there for the players and the coaches. Yeah. But all right, then what would you change?
What would I change?
Let's see if you're going to upset anyone. Yeah.
What would I change? Retreat rule I would change. Obviously, we've already spoken about that, but yeah, that would definitely change from. I'd phase it out at 9s and 10s. Not like completely gone, but I would phase it out. Age group, like playing numbers, I would change. So I would do 7s and 8s. I would do 3v3. Actually, no, 7s I'd do 3v3, 8s I'd do 4v4, 9s I'd do 5v5, 10s and 11s I would then do 7v7, 12s, 13s I would do 9v9, 14s up I would then do 11v11. That's how I would personally structure it. What else would I change?
I'm just wondering, by the way, just from what you said there, is especially with 3v3, 4v4, my under 7s that I'm coaching next year, we haven't got a goalkeeper. So everyone's just going to take it in turns. I'm curious about how many teams we play against will have a goalkeeper, because what's the point of having goalkeepers at that age when most people don't want to? Yeah. And also, most goalkeepers, all goalkeepers, once they get to adults, 97% of their touches are with their feet. Yeah. So actually, is there value of even having goalkeepers at 7s and 8s, or are we better off with 3v3, 4v4 and small goals?
With small goals, yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the one thing that I would say with that is it would encourage more like emergency defending in terms of like blocking shots, blocking passes, like especially if depending on how many goals you had. Like it might be that you only have one mini goal, but it might be that you have two mini goals. So yeah, something like that would be interesting, especially at 7s and 8s. Obviously, the thing would then be, are you starting goalkeepers too late at under 9s then?
But that's my question though. But if most of their touches are with their feet anyway,
but is the technique of being a goalkeeper quite difficult to learn? And it's going to be interesting. We have to get a goalkeeper coach on, because I think
it's the same. I've only just thought of this myself, because I'm like, well, actually, and when I watch most under 7s and 8s goalkeepers, some of them have got good like kind of basic technique, but when they play against kids with a bit of power, they're not getting anywhere near any of the shots anyway. No. So would they actually benefit more from being out on the pitch, taking loads of touches on the ball, and then going in, unless as people can debate in comments, etc. But I think that's something we'll have to.
It's a very good question. Yeah.
Okay, so what does the future hold for you in the coaching world?
That's a good question. In the coaching world, I don't know. I would like to test myself at a higher level within the academy and also in men's football. Obviously, I understand that there's a lot of things that I need to do better. I know that, and I think that it will come with time and potentially doing more courses. I always set myself when I was younger, when I did my B licence, to set myself a target of trying to get on my A licence or AYA by the time I was 30. I've not got long to go, but it is still a target. Whether or not I'll do it, I don't know. Depends on the opportunity that I get. But yeah, I would like to either go a little bit higher within men's football and or within academy football. Academy football, not necessarily higher in terms of like being a phase lead, but I'd like to do like an older age groups, just to try it. Like the one thing that I'll always say, and it's something that I was very reluctant to do because I got too comfortable too early, was like coming out of my comfort zone. And I think that's one thing for me that I've done like no end recently, is sort of like come out of my comfort zone. And again, from a young age, being within academy football, being within the foundation phase, which was 8s to 11s, you just grow accustomed to working with those types of players. And for me personally, I think I'm very, very good at those age groups. I don't know, I've always had a knack with younger players and being able to nurture and develop them, and getting them to try and sort of play and do things the right way. But when I stepped away from Gills the first time, I looked at it and went, actually, like, can I try and better myself and do something different and come out of my comfort zone? And I think eventually there will be a time and a place where I'll end up doing that again, and coming out of my comfort zone to hopefully try and push on and move on up move on through my coaching journey.
Brilliant. That was really good. There was loads of real valuable tips and real specific things that will help coaches. Just before we go, where can anyone that's listening, where can they find you on social media?
On Twitter, it's sort of like the main thing that I use with regards to like my coaching stuff. So you can find me on there.
Okay, and I'll add that into the description. But brilliant. Thanks again, Craig, and look forward to seeing where your coaching journey goes.
Thank you.